Is Ant-Man Quantumania one of the worst Marvel movies in the MCU? Yes. Is this movie an extension to the poor quality we've seen since Endgame? Yes. Is this movie a mix of the same old redundant bag of tricks that completely failed in Phase 4? Yes. Ant-Man 3 Quantumania starts Phase 5 off in the worst way possible.
This isn't good.
The good news? You don't really need to see Loki, Endgame or previous Ant-Man installments to watch this. Although, if you only watched the 2 post-credit scenes and read about what happens to Kang, then you're already up to date with the latest MCU installment.
Not a great plan.
The Ant-Man family is sucked into the quantum realm for Kang to have Scott retrieve a multiverse MacGuffin that powers his broken ship so he can escape. Scott and Hope retrieve the multiverse MacGuffin, defeat Kang with ease, and they all escape, whilst Kang somehow gets trapped inside the multiverse MacGuffin, and it's really unknown what happens to him afterwards. There were some fun parts though, like the early scenes with Veb, although that got annoying very quickly. Broccoli Man was cool too, and it reminded me of Korg we got in Thor Ragnarok.
Why, thank you.
Whilst the scene with the ants at the end was very contrived, seeing Michael Douglas redeemed and save the day was pretty cool too. And it reminded me of that moment in Avatar 1, where all the animals joined the final battle. This scene felt like the equivalent of a Quantum Awa or a Quawa moment. Another good point was Jonathan Majors. He does a great job as Kang, although Kang is a poor villain in this movie and across the MCU thus far. Marvel have really got to step up their game with Kang, as he's been massively disrespected already. He looks weak, he's not this big bad we all hope he was, and doesn't feel anywhere close to how much of a badass Thanos was. The post-credit scene sets up the next Disney Marvel product, Loki Season 2, and this directly ties into Avengers Kang Dynasty in Phase 6, which in typical Marvel fashion, we're teased with the next product, and that just seems ultimately more exciting.
Don't ask questions, just consume product and then get excited for next product.
In short, a very weak plot with terrible dialogue, and what plot we did get was boring and cringe at times, was full of exposition and had identity politics sprinkled in rather unnecessarily.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Forced humour is found throughout this film as well, with no attempt at being serious, even when the movie needs it to be. The most notable moment was when MODOK dies helping Scott, Hope and Cassie. It just didn't need to be a funny moment. It feels like Disney thinks that if we're not laughing, we're not being entertained. This definitely needs fixing, as phases 1 to 3 were serious, and that was one of the stronger reasons as to why these movies were good.
Hell yes.
The whole final third for me was a letdown as well. We had the Deus Ex Machina scene with the 1,000-year-old tech ants appearing out of nowhere, and then to top that off, a really poor fight scene with Kang versus Scott and Hope, and that just ultimately just showed Kang to be a weak villain.
I don't like the look of this.
Considering this was a Ant-Man and the Wasp film, Scott and Hope took a backseat. This was by and large the Janet Van Dyne experience, although Janet forgets, quote unquote, to mention Kang, and forgets to mention he's a space and time travelling supervillain. Cassie, she was just a know-it-all, great at everything, boss bitch, had zero emotion, and did, in honest, a poor job at acting, especially when we compare her to the likes of the Cassies we got in Ant-Man 1 and the one in Endgame. Hank, he was used as a whipping boy, a doormat, a joke, and his only real part was that Deus Ex Machina scene we spoke about earlier with the 1,000-year-old tech ants. The supporting characters like Bill Murray, Quaz, Gentora, again, were mostly subpar and didn't really add much. Jonathan Majors, though, does a great job as Kang, especially when compared to the clown that we got in Loki Season 1. But throughout the film, Kang is portrayed as a weak villain. I mean, come on, he does get defeated by Ant-Man. On top of the weak script, the bad dialogue, the poorly timed humour, there was the bad CGI. The scenes with the giant Ant-Man, they were probably the exception, and they've always been a favourite of mine from Civil War and Endgame, but the rest were poorly done. Speaking of poorly done, was MODOK. Oh my god, this was the cherry on top of this complete disaster. Darren Cross, what an absolute joke. His dialogue, the poor jokes, the massively badly timed humour, and that face, it was some of the worst CGI I've ever seen. And considering he was a machine designed only for killing, he didn't really do much killing, and spent most of his time chasing Cassie around when he should have been trying to kill her instead. Overall, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is a 2-hour film that ends where it began. The only real value we got from this was the mid-credit scene with the Council of Kang, and even that really didn't sit right with me. It feels like a contrived motivation now for wanting to go after the Avengers, for killing Kang the Conqueror. They're beginning to touch the multiverse. What's all really that about?
I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Marvel needs to step up its game in Phase 5 and in Phase 6, as this was an extension of the poor quality we had in Phase 4. Another poorly done, overhyped CGI feast full of not much other than to move us on to the next product. It feels like the MCU is already dying, and if something doesn't change quick, that's surely to be the certainty. If you thought this movie was the turning point for the MCU, think again. Ant-Man 3 Quantumania has continued in the same bleak way Phase 4 ended. Formulaic, forgetful, and a failure for Marvel.